Dark Souls, recently named the greatest game of all time, is an experience in both gameplay and storytelling that stands against the flashy action and stilted narrative of the medium of gaming. Many define Dark Souls as being the hard game, some towering mountain of difficulty that can only be triumphed by the few, the bold, the best of the best. And something that only attracts the best players can only be beaten by the best players. In fact, it can only be beaten, not finished. So of course, that is what the best of gaming as a medium is as a whole. But then, how does Dark Souls do this? Simple, by disregarding the normal, the safe, the expected. To chop the initial game that would eventually become a trilogy into terms of the tags players might see on Steam or the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Marketplace, Dark Souls is often referred to as an action-adventure Souls-like RPG. That's right. The game is the defining term of a genre. The genre itself, however, would be best described as 3D melee Metroidvania. That is to say, the game is held in a 3D space, primarily using melee combat, in this case with swords, axes, and spears, and using an interconnected world that sprinkles goodies across large, sprawling maps as a way of giving freedom to explore, while locking off later areas until specific requirements have been met. Bosses killed, keys acquired, skill thresholds passed. None of these are the determining factor that makes Dark Souls the experience it is, however. The crux of the game is often brought down to its bosses. Several of these bosses, like Ornstein and Smo, are still some of the best fights in gaming today, while other bosses, like the Bed of Chaos, Copper Demon, Demon Fire Sage, Centipede Demon, Ceaseless Discharge, Pinwheel, Moonlight Butterfly, Dark Sun Gwendolyn, and the game's own camera, are some of the worst examples of boss design across all of gaming. This is the best game in the history of gaming, right? But more importantly than the bosses themselves is how the player fights them. Attacks are deliberate and slow, no matter what weapon the player has chosen. There's nothing flashy about swinging a sword, and some weapons even cause the player to stumble when the attack fails to connect. It leaves the player feeling significantly human, in a medium that will more often than not give the player control over a god. So, emerging triumphant over the godly lords and fiery demons and death itself leaves players with a sense of satisfaction that no other game has been able to instill in players in the decades that developers have been struggling to release both fun and lucrative games. On the side of story, the game itself only has a handful of required spoken lines, but a deep lore hidden across environmental elements and within item, weapon, and armor descriptions. This story, hidden in the form of a puzzle to be pieced together by players who are drawn in enough by the rest of Dark Souls' design, has spurred not only online discourse, but several careers for those who would pick the pieces together and retell these hidden tales. All of this comes together for a title that has spawned so many copycats that a genre had to be made with "It's like Dark Souls" set as the defining factor. Now there is anime Dark Souls, sci-fi dystopian Dark Souls, bad Dark Souls, Viagra addict Dark Souls. We let marketing say it was Dark Souls, but not really Dark Souls. Gun Dark Souls made by the actual Dark Souls developer. Samurai Dark Souls made by the actual Dark Souls developer. Another Gun Dark Souls made by the actual Dark Souls developer that you forgot came out before Dark Souls. Not really Dark Souls, but games media doesn't know how else to describe hard games Dark Souls. The result of all these knockoffs, spin-offs, and rip-offs is a bloated genre that has since had the staggering effect of innovating on the regular mechanics of Dark Souls, with a focus usually on how blocking, parrying, and dodging can be improved from how it was implemented in the original game. The inverse of this being a collection of terrible shovelware that weaken the genre with their mere existence. It's a benefit and a deficit of this nebulous space where Dark Souls stands. AAA budgets funneled into an indie project makes for one of the most raw, deliberate, convoluted experiences that is unique for every single player that attempts to make it from brutal encounter to brutal encounter. Defeating Dark Souls is almost a spiritual experience that rewards patience and the mastery of a skill that only has one application: to play Dark Souls. And yet somehow, the game with the largest crossover of fans from Dark Souls is Kingdom Hearts, a creation that combines the IP of the largest media company in the world, Disney, with the corporate AAA development of NFT shill Square Enix. Anyway, this is a mild defense of Kingdom Hearts 3. Howdy, I'm Prakuza, and welcome to DevBox, where we take games and pick around their insides to see what makes them tick. Today, that means we'll be looking at a game from the past and seeing both how it holds up today, as well as how it held up on release. So let's give Kingdom Hearts 3 some retro respect. Seriously, why did I pick a 4-year-old game to make for my first one of these? Kingdom Hearts 1 is an aged masterpiece. The paint is chipped and faded, but it's still beautiful to look at, both as a beginning of something grander and an experience of a more archaic time in game development. It can't be stated clear enough for those unfamiliar with the original Kingdom Hearts. Which, why are you watching this video anyway? This is a series so old that the right analog stick had not ubiquitously become the location for camera controls yet, instead being relegated to a very slow-moving L2 and R2 on the DualShock 2. The HD remasters have actually done a lot to ease some of these burdens of older game designs. Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories came next, and it only exists if you like math. So for me, a yes, but a big no for the majority of the fanbase. And Rechain of Memories just doesn't exist at all if you know what's good for you. Kingdom Hearts 2 is the highest point the series reached on console, with snappier combat and a story that better wove the Disney worlds into the game. If this video was about elevating the best experiences in the series, and was by most other fans, it would be talking about every aspect of this game. But this will just be a pit stop for us, moving on to newer pastures. A series of mobile titles scattered fans for the next 15 years. Releasing for the Nintendo DS, PSP, thank goodness no Vita, 3DS, and mobile devices long before the rest of the world was in the mobile sphere, there's some great content here, with Birth by Sleep deserving its own video down the line. But this was otherwise considered a dry spell for fans, as many of us waited for the fabled Kingdom Hearts 3, a game we almost didn't believe would ever arrive. Then we got Kingdom Hearts 3, starting with an initial trailer a whole year after the release of the last real game in the series, Dream Drop Distance, then years of quiet development as Square Enix split its teams, and specifically director Tetsuya Nomura, over several games like Final Fantasy XV for the next 6 years. There was fake out after fake out, release date announcements and delays, but finally we got Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue. And then we got releases of all the old games on the new consoles, HD remasters of HD remasters, and then we got Kingdom Hearts 3. Fucking finally. Seeing as how this is a mild defense of the game, let's start with the critiques that Kingdom Hearts 3 received right out of the gate. Some of the critiques are understandable, especially for longtime fans. No critical mode on release, a meandering story, Arendelle, just Arendelle. Others are less so. The worlds have no effect on the story, combat is floaty and easy, distracting and numerous attraction attacks, having to download the secret ending and initial super boss. To start, I'm going to quickly shut down these critiques before moving to the good stuff. The meat and potatoes, if you will. Critique the first. The worlds have no effect on the story. Say what you will about the story, but each world pushes the agenda of Organization 13, showing what is at stake if Sora and pals choose not to fight and who they'll be up against. Although, more will be coming on that later. Critique the second. Combat is floaty and easy. It's a kid's game. After decades of complaining over the quadruple gravity of Kingdom Hearts 1, the float in Kingdom Hearts 3 is an example of the developer listening to their fans. And the eventual critical mode and easy/pro challenges prove how wide the skill window for Kingdom Hearts 3 can actually be. So while it might have felt easy for longtime players and veterans of the series, it's not for longtime players to be challenged and force their face against a wall. Critique the third. Distracting and numerous attraction attacks. Learn to read. Attraction attacks are clearly denoted when they appear, and there are options to shorten the elongated intros and outros. If players don't like them, then don't use them. And if they keep using them on accident, then stop spamming triangle. L2 exists for a reason, and that reason is to stop using things like attraction attacks when the player doesn't want to. But they also make the player invincible. So the people complaining were probably utilizing them this whole time, and just want to find something to bitch about. Congratulations, you're your own worst enemy. Complaint the fourth. Having to download the secret ending and initial super bosses. Day 1 updates and additional updates throughout the first week of a game's release is nothing new, and it wasn't in 2019. However, no. This can be a step beyond nuisance for the Kingdom Hearts fans who don't have consistent access to high internet speed. That is an accessibility issue that makes the broken and incomplete way games are launched these days inexcusable. There's no real defending the fact that a large group of players simply would never get access to this content that should have been included on the disc. Yeah, no rebuttal. Just because day one patches are common doesn't mean that selling broken or incomplete discs is a good thing. Be better. All of AAA game dev. Alright, well, with a quick summary of some critiques out of the way, let's get on to focusing on the cool shit. Starting with the combat. It could be worth starting this section by talking about the differences between float and weight. Specifically, what do some players and critics mean when they say the game has floaty combat? In some cases, this means that characters move around too quickly, jumping 100 feet in the air in order to attack an enemy that should be more of a puzzle to be solved than a target to have the game automatically find and hit. Additionally, this also means that attacks themselves feel as if they have no weight. Neither the player nor the enemies appear to react when Sora beats a Heartless over the head with the metal beam. There's little kickback and a lack of real indication that damage is even being done. To get back to the Dark Souls references from earlier, back in the intro, attacks in the best Souls-likes are often accompanied by a flash of blood or other internal liquids depending on the specific type of enemy, or a quick flash of light and pushback on the Knight in Hollow Knight. This also usually comes with an attack animation that shows the player character struggle with the weight of their weapon before striking. It all comes together to make every hit given and received feel grounded, almost real. The float in Kingdom Hearts will sometimes cause enemies to mildly flinch and occasionally be launched by the final hit of a combo. It doesn't have the same visceral feeling that fans of these games might be looking for, but that isn't what Kingdom Hearts 3 tries for. The high-flying attacks have improved tracking and are more likely to land on target than any other game in the series. This means significantly fewer fights like Trickmaster from Kingdom Hearts 1, where the whole gimmick is that you can't reach his hurt box and bounce off. Now, combat gets to be about finding your moment to land an attack and dodging better telegraphed hits from enemies that actually fit on camera. No more guessing whether you'll hit or not. If the button is pressed, damage is dealt, so mash X and hope for the best. When it comes to the lack of weight, this only really comes up against bosses and large enemies, things that shouldn't go flying from an attack anyway. Shadows and other smaller enemies go flying when they get knocked around by the final hit in a combo, so Sora's Keyblade certainly has weight to it. Even if his attacks are much faster than they used to be and have a tendency to slice through enemies rather than bashing them away on the first couple hits. Next up, we're going to talk about something that's just a net positive. Nothing anyone's complained about. Super Magic. This is a rework of a mechanic that was first introduced in Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. The PSP one, not Fragmentary Passage. This is just the latest version of these super spells, with more restricted access to the overpowered magic that can wipe rooms of Heartless in a heartbeat. Considering how powerful magic can be in previous games, this leaning into ultra-strong magic can be seen as an endorsement of the history of abusing magical attacks. Speedruns of Dream Drop Distance that cast nothing but Balloon Ra, valid. Kingdom Hearts 2 Magnet and Reflect spamming, valid. The senseless murder of 10,000 shadows in order to level up high enough to actually fight Sephiroth. I don't see how that's related, but sure, I guess, as long as it's just that guy. Again, to the Dark Souls comparisons, magic can trivialize combat, and Square Enix seems all too interested in keeping that trend going. Not only is the base magic at its strongest in Kingdom Hearts 3, but the super magic can even be banked long enough to let it completely obliterate some encounters. Magic is front and center for even casual fans in a way that had only been previously utilized by the still thriving speedrun community. Along with super magic, there is also now second forms, even a handful of third forms, all determined by the chosen Keyblade. These allow players to string combos together in order to find new ways to use the Keyblade. This includes turning the Keyblade into claws, wands, and even a gun. Hang back, modders, no need to give Sora an AK-47, Square already gave him a gat. The result of these new forms is often that combat becomes a fluid motion from one style of combat to another, with different Keyblade transformations offering completely different ways for Sora to take down Heartless and Nobody. For most fights, it is more form than function, adding additional flash to Sora's attacks. But some Keyblade transformations are so strong, they've made their way into the routing for speedruns, since they can body through hordes of enemies. And this is only one way that each Keyblade uniquely alters combat in Kingdom Hearts 3. And that leads us into shot locks, a holdover first introduced in Birth by Sleep, and finally brought to the numbered titles through Kingdom Hearts 3. There are many reasons Birth by Sleep is my favorite game in the series, and shot locks are up there among them. This comes with a focus meter that fills up slowly as Sora attacks enemies. Neat! Another special status that comes as a reward for focusing aggression and hitting enemies and bosses as much as possible. Anyway, the result of filling this focus meter is access to a special attack that slows down time and lets Sora auto-target a number of enemies, which changes based on the specific Keyblade and its accompanying shotlock. After releasing the focus, the ability will automatically attack the targeted enemies for heavy damage. This attack can run the gamut from chunking away boss health bars to wiping out entire rooms filled with enemies. So that's everything that Kingdom Hearts 3 added to the combat, or improved on the formula from earlier games, or took from the quote-unquote spin-offs between the numbered titles. But does a bunch of new mechanics and updates automatically mean better? No. No, it does not. And in some cases, boss fights can honestly feel flat, as the player is able to slap it around without needing to really think about positioning or reacting to specific attacks. A troubling result of removing the reaction commands. At the request of some loud fans. However, in my opinion, and it should probably be stated fairly clearly by now that this entire video is opinion-based, like any review, the good outweighs the bad. Sora's updated moveset and the design of the majority of the bosses works in tandem with the floaty combat. I mean, imagine trying to get on top of the King of Toys in Kingdom Hearts 1 or 2. It would have been designed around platforms, and the boss would have been given a much more rigid moveset in order to keep from knocking the player off constantly. Instead, Kingdom Hearts 3 gets the opportunity to give the player a boss to chase, and using its body as a shield to keep Sora from just spell spamming it to death. It's flawed, to say the least, but not ruined, nor incomplete, and no more than one occasion gives some of the best encounters across the entire series. I mean, just fucking look at Skull. Look at that badass Ice Wolf.
That was clearly supposed to be Elsa and not Hans.
How can you not love jumping up, booping that snoot, and blasting a Fireza into its face? And speaking of float, let's take to the skies and fly. I need to work on my segues. Gummy ships! This is easily the most maligned part of the Kingdom Hearts series, and no, I don't mean controversial. This isn't a divisive subject, nor is it something that is argued heartily among fans. You could ask a billion Kingdom Hearts fans if the gummy ships sucked in every Kingdom Hearts game from 2002 to 2019. And 999,999,999 will say it sucked and could be replaced with a list of worlds or the Garden of Assemblage from the Kingdom Hearts 2 Rando mod. However, I am that 1 in a billion. It's okay, I understand that I'm special, I'm awesome. I actually enjoy having my nipples shaved off with a cheese grater. Don't you wish you could be me? Seriously though, I love the gummy ships, from Kingdom Hearts 1 and on. I love putting together ship designs of my own and testing them out on missions, so you might want to take this next section with a grain of salt, but regardless, the gummy ships have never been as good as they are in Kingdom Hearts 3. So, point the first on gummy ships is the space that we fly around in. While these are usually little more than a glorified menu, sometimes with the ship as a special little cursor, Kingdom Hearts 3 went, nah, fuck it. We're putting a new game in here. Right in the middle of the game we're already making. That's right, gone are the days of a simple collection of locations to blast off to, or a top-down map with nothing in it. Now, there is not one, but 3 open skies for Sora and gang to roam around in. A full 3D environment filled with activities to complete and items to collect. Oh, and for those who remember collecting the pieces that fell off of enemy ships in Kingdom Hearts 1 or the rewards across missions in Kingdom Hearts 2. No, these are not only new gummy ship upgrades and pieces to collect, they're also Keyblade upgrade materials that have nothing to do with powering up the gummy ship, but can also be found in other locations. So it doesn't just arbitrarily make these missions mandatory for upgrades, but instead gives the players options for how to go about improving different Keyblades. And that isn't even getting into the ships. On top of the new space to explore in Kingdom Hearts 3, there are also entirely new ways to customize the gummy ship. A lot of it is holdovers coming on from Kingdom Hearts 2, such as being able to overlay formation and utility gummies, meaning the shape blocks can occupy the same space as the guns and engines. Similarly, the paint and skin system first added in Kingdom Hearts 2 were brought over to Kingdom Hearts 3. However, there are now a plethora of more options that can be used to customize individual pieces apart from each other, with new skin textures and colors. Do you want to make a functional hand in a sleeve? with the hand made out of skin and the sleeve made out of cloth? You've got it. Do you want to build a castle with a lava moat around it? You've got it. Do you want to make a cybernetic helmet with lasers for eyes? You've got it. I wrote this part before having actually built any of these, and I regret my life decisions for how long that took to capture. Part the third is the combat. We'll talk about the boss fights in a second, but before that is the arcade-style encounters. That's right, combat is no longer the mandatory way to travel from world to world. In fact, only a handful of encounters have to be fought in order to progress through the game. And aside from these mostly being optional challenges, they're also more fun than they've been across the series. Stripping down the gummy missions to a more Darius style of combat makes for simple gameplay across short segments. Honestly, that one aspect probably solves the majority of complaints gummy missions have had in the past. Namely, that they are a frustrating time tax that breaks up the pace of the game by forcing players into seemingly unrelated content for no reason. However, this content is not only the most fun it has been in the series, it is also almost entirely optional. And the stuff that isn't optional falls in line with the rest of Kingdom Hearts to be different, but not the same type of shakeup that breaks the pace in previous games. So, in addition to the ordinary gummy fights that can be found throughout the open space that is Kingdom Hearts 3's Gummy World, there are also boss fights. Like many aspects of Kingdom Hearts 3's gummy mechanics, this is technically another holdover from Kingdom Hearts 2, as there were boss fights in that game's gummy missions as well. However, they are nothing like the fights here. Several of these are multi-phase boss encounters with the Highwind soloing against giant Heartless that need to be shot in specific locations to be whittled down throughout the encounter. Some of these even require specific gummy ship builds in order to even challenge them, forcing the player to delicately interact with the customization system in order to make ships that can meet the attribute thresholds, while still having the DPS needed to get through the fight before dying. And, like the other missions, these attribute-specific fights are optional. As for the mandatory bosses, many of them might be difficult to some new players, or those that aren't used to bullet hells or the Darius-style shooters, but they can be completed with even a base-level Highwind. So, again, the Gummy World is almost entirely optional, with the mandatory fights being doable without the need to grind any of the optional content. This means that not only is the entire Gummy section of Kingdom Hearts 3 better than it had ever been, it didn't force players who weren't interested in this change in gameplay styles to engage with it before heading to every Disney World. And let me tell you about these new Disney Worlds. Slightly better segue. I'm going to start by ignoring any type of controversy that might come from discussing the worlds in Kingdom Hearts 3 and just call them gorgeous. The new look in Unreal Engine 4 is just absolutely beautiful. It's hard to express how incredible it is to jump from Kingdom Hearts 1 with the tiny boxes that pretended to be larger than they really were, versus giant maps decorated with grass that flowed in the wind and incredibly smooth models that bridges the gap between the cartoon style of classic Disney while also having some of the best realistic visuals for more human characters like Captain Jack in the Caribbean. Now, to stop gushing about how beautiful the game is, let's talk about the actual level designs. And let me just say, these levels have some of the most unique stories across the series. As might be obvious to fans, or unrecognized outright by casual players, the best worlds in Kingdom Hearts are the ones that tell an original story within their relative Disney worlds. This is more than the case in Kingdom Hearts 3, with the Disney worlds that have unique stories being the best in the game. This mostly includes Toy Story and Big Hero 6, which have original stories that take place after their original movies. And rumor has it, the Toy Story level is even canon to the actual movie franchise between the first and second film. But I could not actually confirm that, and didn't really care to. It's a weird theory. Anyway, each of these are interesting dives into these familiar worlds that explore how these Disney characters might be living their lives after the credits roll. It's almost like that could be a second wish fulfillment that Kingdom Hearts could be offering to make the most out of the fucking crossover concept instead of just going over the movie, but faster, worse, and without the punchlines that made half the scenes funny. Looking at you, Kingdom of Corona. A horse brought Flynn, or Eugene, or Shazam. San Francisco is especially an example of exploring these characters, with Kingdom Hearts 3 taking the time to show how Hero has grown since the end of Big Hero 6, as well as the way that the loss of Takashi and the sacrifice of the original Baymax continues to weigh on him. It's interesting to see that a replacement Baymax is exactly that, a replacement. And seeing the original come back all corrupted due to Hiro leaving him behind is one of the best character moments in the game. Now, pulling the camera a little grander, a lot of hay has been raised in the last few years around the importance of the Disney worlds in the Kingdom Hearts series. I'm not necessarily sure what sparked it, but considering the discourse around Kingdom Hearts 3, it's likely that it was in fact this game's use of Disney worlds that started snowballing into the other games in the series. Specifically, it seems to be the fact that Kingdom Hearts 3 failed to make the Disney worlds matter in any way to the overall narrative of the game. However, there are two things that seem to go under the radar when talking about the effect that the Disney worlds have on the overall story of Kingdom Hearts 3. Namely, while it is true that Sora never learns the power of waking as he travels from world to world, these excursions all introduce and elevate the stakes building up to the final confrontation with Xehanort, as well as prepare Sora to use the power he had only lost access to because of his doubts. In the case of the stakes, this is primarily done as Sora finds Organization 13 sticking their fingers into every Disney World's pies. That is either a disgusting saying or an excessively horny one. Considering the topic of discussion today, I'm going to go with disgusting on both counts. Get your weird organization fingers away from those children's. The first way that the stakes is improved comes from two of the worst levels in the game, the Kingdom of Corona and Arendelle, which showcases that if Sora and co. don't show up to fight in the Keyblade Graveyard, then Rapunzel, Anna, and Elsa will be abducted and brought into the clash against the organization's darknesses in their place. On the second note, the whole meandering storyline of Sora needing to learn the power of waking is subtly covered as he meets new characters. As is often the case in Kingdom Hearts, Sora is essentially joining each Disney character for a very special episode, or helping to learn the same lessons from the movie alongside them. In the process, Sora is slowly becoming the person who will be worthy of using the power of waking. More specifically, this means that Sora will slowly shed off his self-doubt, until he can believe in himself and his own power enough to unlock the power of waking that had already been within him. Yeah, it's all believe in yourself after school special crap for children. But last I checked, this is a children's series that almost had its own after school show that I am talking about at great length in my 30s. Should I even really be making this defense? Fuck it, I love the series and this game included. So we soldier on! Defend the children's video game. I swear I'll talk about more adult things next time. Oh, who am I kidding? It'll probably be Pokemon Yellow or some shit. Anyway, moving back to the Disney world, let's step away from the Kingdom Hearts story again, with its time travel and friendship and all that stuff that gives the good brain juices. Instead, let's move on to the flashing lights and dead enemy brain juices. That is to say, the dopamine drip that is the world's individual designs. I've talked at length, talked now that I'm recording the audio, about the quality of the level gimmicks in Kingdom Hearts 3, but let's talk about them again. Anyone who's actually played the game, which if you haven't played the game, why are you here? I mean, thanks for the view. Hope you've enjoyed so far, but go play the game. It's awesome, as are all the others. Anyway, anyone who's actually played the game will know the examples I'll be going to about level gimmicks. There's the Gigas mechs in the toy box and the ship combat in the Caribbean. While the Gigas might be the easier sell, as piloting a giant mech that kills Heartless is the coolest damn thing in the series, the ship combat is a quality example of Square Enix succeeding at something that Ubisoft has spent the better part of a decade trying, succeeding, failing again, then delaying into development now. Seriously, the Leviathan ship / Black Pearl opens up an entire open world while also having ship combat that puts some naval-based games to shame. It is incredible. Even if I did consider the Caribbean story to be superfluous to the narrative of Kingdom Hearts 3, I would still call the level necessary for the fun of this ship combat itself. And that is ignoring the second entire open world that is included in San Francisco, which doesn't have as interesting of a level-specific mechanic, but the introduction of Glide, included alongside the extreme verticality of the level, makes for one of the best places to explore in the game. This is also on top of the fact that San Francisco has a day-night cycle, which essentially repurposes the level to play double duty for hunting down items, Heartless, and Lucky Emblems. Hidden Mickeys. However, the design of these levels have nothing on the design of the bosses within them, as well as the bosses that appear at the end of the game. And let's talk about that boss rush and the DLC that added to it, because holy shit. It isn't rare for the Kingdom Hearts series to end a game with a boss rush. This includes the back-to-back Ansem, Darkside, and Boat Ansem fights in the original, cleaning up the Organization 13 remnants before the 4 phases of Xemnas, and Blue Eyes Cyber Auto-Scroll in Kingdom Hearts 2, the many Xehanorts, Breg, Vanitas fights at the end of the 3 character paths in Birth by Sleep. Listen, there are more examples, but we'd be here all day. There are like 100 games in this series, and they all put the player through a boss rush to see the end credits. However, the boss rush in Kingdom Hearts 3 is certainly a different beast altogether. It is a handful of fights, all fought in order of who Sora, or really the player, wants to have as a partner first or second across the encounters. Because of course, the 6 extra lights that Sora has gathered up until this point matter for nil until Sora shows up to deliver the real smackdown to Organization 13. One thing that separates this from other titles in the series, though, especially in Kingdom Hearts 2, is the way that all 13 members of Organization 13 need to be challenged in a row. And if I say 13 again, my brain might explode, which is a heavy improvement on the previous game, as half of the original organization was already gone on Go, what with everything Sora and Riku did in Chain of Memories. So this acts as a much more impressive narrative cap on a game that had otherwise struggled with its narrative, thanks to the more subtle ways that Sora's growth is being prodded throughout the game. Pushing that narrative through line further is the fact that Sora is now fighting alongside the other Warriors of Light. This includes longtime fan favorites like Riku and Kairi, as well as series mainstays like Roxas and Axel. However, it is the inclusion of Aqua and Ventus that ties the whole series together and really hits hard on years of building up these characters. Also, again, Birth by Sleep is my favorite, so that was just some good old-fashioned fan service for me. And I fucking loved it. And the reveal that Ansem's guardian Heartless really was Terra the whole time? Mwah! Chef's kiss, bro. But beyond the narrative weight of the bosses and this rush is the way that these individual enemies fight, with their own unique styles that clash in ways with each other, forcing the player to carefully consider which organization member needs to be burned down first. This is because each of the bosses are challenged in groups, usually up to about 3 at a time, with the death of each one triggering a cutscene and removing them from the remainder of the fight. This is a unique situation that not only puts the individual bosses' movesets on display, but also means that enemies that are able to kill Sora one-on-one have to be juggled throughout these fights. Of course, the additional Warriors of Light help to mitigate the difficulty, as they can distract whoever the player isn't currently targeting, but the weight and design of these enemies do still get their own chance to shine. Not in the base game, but in the DLC. Now, on to the DLC. While it can be somewhat disappointing to quickly whittle down longtime enemies like Vanitas without much difficulty in the base game, at least as long as the easy and pro settings aren't on, the data bosses in the Remind DLC removes the backup, ups the aggression, and then adds a few new attacks to the organization members' movesets. This allows each member to be highlighted in a way that they aren't able to be in the group fights. So with the introduction of the DLC, Square Enix gets a real have your cake and eat it moment, as Kingdom Hearts 3 gets an impressive set piece to deliver narrative impact, while also being able to make the most of these boss designs as individual challenges later on. Speaking of challenges, back in the base game, this boss rush ends with the final confrontation against Xehanort, and it lives up to the hype that the series had been building for this climactic face-off for nearly 20 years, at the time of Kingdom Hearts 3's release, I mean. This is the guy who's been pulling the strings against Sora and his friends for years. This is the threat that created Ansem, Seeker of Darkness, and every other offshoot players have been fighting all of this time. And he has multiple phases that send Sora through Scala ad Kylum and back, chasing the old man across space and time as Xehanort pulls out every trick he has available to him to try coming out on top, including sending out clones of the previous organization members we'd already fought. It's an incredible fight with one of the best songs in the Kingdom Hearts series, against some of the coolest humanoid designs yet. Finally on combat, back in the DLC, the final fight here is the toughest challenge in the history of the series. Lingering will eat your heart out. Yozora is a hair-pulling nightmare of a fight that requires mastery of Kingdom Hearts 3's combat that no other fight asks. A casual player can see the end credits, but it takes dedication to drain Yozora's health bar all the way down. I've personally done it once, and never plan to try it again. In conclusion, So, here we are, at the end of it all, having fought through impressive levels and defeated some of the toughest and most spectacular bosses in the series. And now is the moment where I make a grandiose statement about Kingdom Hearts 3 being the best game that Square Enix has ever made, let alone the best Kingdom Hearts to ever grace this earth. But I'm not going to do that. No, this is a mild defense of Kingdom Hearts 3, not a hot take. There are certainly flaws in this game. Not every boss is Xehanort quality, and the hair-tearing of Yozora is honestly Elden Ring levels of unfair. As neat as it is to see Baymax fight corrupted Baymax, flying on our friendly robot's back is a chore. The final ship battle against the Kraken in the Caribbean drags on longer than any of these naval fights should. So no, Kingdom Hearts 3 is not a perfect game. In fact, it's not even the best game in the Kingdom Hearts series. My personal favorite is still, as I've said before, Birth by Sleep, and most fans would give that title to Kingdom Hearts 2. Even I would probably put Kingdom Hearts 2 over 3, even after all of this. The point of this isn't to comment on how perfect Kingdom Hearts 3 is, though. I just hate hearing the loudest people in the Kingdom Hearts space keep talking about how quote-unquote bad this game is. Nothing in Kingdom Hearts is perfect, even if it is my favorite series. But given every way that this game succeeds, the hyperbole of calling Kingdom Hearts 3 a disappointment or a failure or what have you that helps no one, it certainly doesn't help fans. I mean, Square Enix listened to players complain enough to skip reaction commands in Kingdom Hearts 3, only to confusedly be asked to put them back in for Kingdom Hearts 4. You want to lose cool shit in Kingdom Hearts? Bitching about everything in sight is how you lose cool shit in Kingdom Hearts. Seriously, we don't need to defend every decision the devs make, nor do we have to not be critical of the series. In fact, we should be analyzing the things we love critically, all the time. And sometimes, that's going to mean seeing the successes alongside the failures, to weigh the two against each other and figure out which wins out over the other. In my case, I love Kingdom Hearts 3, because the pros outweigh the cons nearly 2-1, but that's my opinion, and I'd love to know yours. Feel free to leave a comment below. What did you love, or what would you like to see improved on Kingdom Hearts 3 and into Kingdom Hearts 4? And what should I look at for the next Retro Respect? Probably something older than 4 years, but that's a story for next time. See you soon.